Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, June 4th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. It will be a warm day in Riverside with a high of 90 degrees and a low of 61.3. Make sure to keep cool and stay hydrated as the temperatures rise this afternoon. In our headlines today, we are looking into the House decision regarding the war with Iran. We will also break down why Ford is recalling 425,000 vehicles and issuing a rare do not drive warning to owners. Beyond those major reports, we have a look at other stories making waves across the globe as we unpack the details that matter to you. All of that and much more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned as we dive into today's show. Big news out of Capitol Hill this morning. The House just passed a War Powers resolution aimed at ending U.S. military hostilities with Iran, and the vote crossed party lines. For more on what this means, we're joined by our political correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. Yes, this is a genuinely historic moment. Yesterday, June 3rd, the Republican-led House of Representatives passed the resolution by a vote of 215 to 208. It's being described as a major bipartisan rebuke of President Donald Trump's handling of what's been called Operation Epic Fury. And remember, this kind of formal pushback from a president's own party doesn't happen very often.
So who actually crossed the aisle to make this happen?
4 Republicans broke ranks and joined a unified Democratic caucus. Those were Representatives Brian Fitzpatrick, Thomas Massie, Warren Davidson, and Tom Barrett. According to congressional reporting, they argued the 60-day window mandated by the War Powers Act had clearly expired. And without those 4 votes, this resolution simply doesn't pass. So in a narrowly divided House, every one of them mattered.
Remind us, Ethan. How did Operation Epic Fury actually begin?
It started on February 28th of this year, just over 3 months ago, with combined U.S. and Israeli strikes inside Iran. Since then, the conflict has spiraled in scope and cost. American taxpayers have spent more than $100 billion on operations so far. And we've seen ripple effects in the global economy, including a sharp spike in gas prices and major shipping disruptions through the Strait of Hormuz.
That's a staggering price tag. What's been the reaction from House leadership?
Well, this was a clear defeat for House Speaker Mike Johnson, who, according to multiple outlets, had delayed the vote for 2 weeks, hoping to avoid exactly this outcome. On the other side, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries was sharp in his criticism. Jeffries said, quote, "This is a reckless and costly war of choice," end quote. That language tells you how Democrats plan to frame this heading into the midterms.
And I understand there was a major attack just hours before the vote. What happened?
Yes, this really raised the stakes. Hours before lawmakers cast their ballots, a strike involving 30 drones and missiles hit Kuwait International Airport. 1 person was killed and 63 were injured. The U.S. government attributed what it called the, quote, heinous aggression, end quote, to the IRGC. That's Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. But Iran is telling a very different story.
What's Iran saying about the attack?
Tehran is claiming the damage at Kuwait International wasn't caused by Iranian weapons at all. Instead, Iranian officials say a malfunctioning U.S. Patriot air defense system was responsible. That's obviously a contested claim, and investigators will be sorting through wreckage and intelligence for some time. But it's already become part of the political fight here at home over who's responsible for civilian casualties.
Let's talk about the legal piece. What exactly does the War Powers Act require?
The War Powers Act of 1973 says the president must get congressional authorization within 60 days of committing U.S. forces to hostilities. In this case, that 60-day deadline passed on May 1st. So for more than a month now, critics say the operation has been running without proper legal authority. And that's the heart of why this resolution moved forward.
But the Trump administration has pushed back on that interpretation, right?
Right. They've offered 3 main arguments to bypass the 60-day requirement. The first is what's being called the ceasefire reset. The administration says a brief ceasefire in April effectively restarted the 60-day clock. The second argument involves how you define hostilities. White House lawyers contend that the naval blockades currently in place are defensive in nature and therefore don't meet the legal threshold for hostilities under the statute.
And the third argument?
The third is the broadest. It's a direct constitutional challenge to the War Powers Act itself. The administration is questioning whether the act is even valid under the president's Article II authority as commander-in-chief. That's an argument presidents of both parties have flirted with over the decades, but rarely so openly. If it ever reached the Supreme Court, it could reshape the balance of war powers entirely.
And Speaker Johnson had his own justification, didn't he?
He did, and it raised a lot of eyebrows. Johnson claimed that a continuous state of war with Iran has existed since 1979, essentially arguing that no new authorization is necessary. But that claim is disputed by both the State Department and the Congressional Research Service. Neither agency supports the idea of an unbroken state of war stretching back nearly half a century. So the Speaker is somewhat out on a limb there.
Now this moves to the Senate. What's the picture over there?
The Senate has actually been moving in parallel. A companion measure already cleared a procedural hurdle by a vote of 50 to 47. 4 Republicans joined Democrats on that one. Those were Senators Collins, Murkowski, Paul, and Cassidy. So there's clearly some bipartisan appetite in the upper chamber as well, though the final vote is a separate question.
When could the Senate actually take this up?
That's still uncertain. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has not yet scheduled a final vote. But Democratic leaders are pushing hard for action before the war reaches its 100th day. And that milestone falls on June 6th, which is just 2 days from today. So expect significant pressure on Thune in the next 48 hours.
Even if it passes the Senate, doesn't the president have the final say?
He effectively does, yes. President Trump is certain to veto this resolution if it reaches his desk. And right now, supporters simply don't have the 2/3 majority in either chamber needed to override that veto. So in practical terms, this is more of a symbolic assertion of congressional authority than a binding constraint on the operation. But symbolism in Washington can carry real political weight.
So why bother passing it at all if it can't override a veto?
That's the question opponents are asking. But supporters say the vote itself matters. It puts every member of Congress on the record about an open-ended war. It also lays down a marker for the midterm elections, where Democrats clearly plan to make Operation Epic Fury a central issue. And historically, even non-binding war powers votes have shifted public opinion and pressured administrations to change course.
What about the broader public reaction? Are Americans tracking this closely?
Polling suggests yes, especially because of the economic impact. Gas prices have climbed noticeably, and shipping disruptions through the Strait of Hormuz have driven up costs on a wide range of imported goods. When a war starts hitting people at the pump and at the grocery store, public patience tends to wear thin quickly. That's part of why those 4 House Republicans felt politically safe enough to break with the president.
And what does this say about the state of the Republican coalition right now?
It says there are real fractures, particularly on foreign policy. You have figures like Thomas Massie and Warren Davidson, who come from a more non-interventionist wing of the party. And then there are senators like Rand Paul and Susan Collins, who often vote independently on war powers questions. Add in the sheer cost, more than $100 billion, and you get a coalition that's harder for leadership to hold together.
Last question, Ethan. What should we be watching for over the next few days?
3 things, Grace. First, whether Senator Thune schedules that Senate vote before June 6th, the 100th day of the war. Second, any further escalation on the ground, especially after the Kuwait International Airport attack. And third, whether the administration shifts its legal arguments or doubles down on that Article II challenge. Any one of those could reshape the story by the end of the week.
Fascinating reporting. Ethan, thanks so much for walking us through it.
My pleasure, Grace. Always glad to be here.
Now to our second story this morning, and it's a big one for anyone driving a Ford. The company is dealing with 2 major recalls, affecting nearly 425,000 vehicles here in the United States. Our reporter Chloe has been digging into the details. Chloe, good morning, and let's start with what's actually happening here.
Good morning, Grace. So Ford is juggling two completely separate safety crises at the same time, and they're very different in nature. One is a massive seatbelt recall affecting about 420,000 large SUVs. The other is much smaller, only about 4,653 vehicles, but it's so serious that Ford has issued what's called a do not drive warning. That's the most severe safety designation the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration can issue.
A do not drive warning sounds alarming. Which vehicles are we talking about there?
This one covers certain 2021 through 2026 Bronco Sports and 2022 through 2026 Mavericks. According to Car and Driver and Top Speed, the issue is in the front lower control arm ball joints. Those are the critical pivot points connecting the front wheels to the suspension and steering. Ford says some of these were incorrectly assembled or improperly repaired at the factory, and the ball stud may only be partially engaged with the wheel knuckle.
And what happens if that joint actually fails while someone's driving?
That's the nightmare scenario, Grace. Top Speed reports that if the joint separates while the vehicle is in motion, the wheel essentially drops out of its design geometry. Steering input becomes meaningless, and you get an instant loss of vehicle control. We're talking about this happening potentially at highway speeds, during a turn, or even a routine lane change. That's why regulators reserve the do not drive label for defects that pose immediate risk before a crash even happens.
Now, you mentioned the recall is small relative to the model years involved. Why only 4,600 vehicles across 5 model years?
That's where the controversy comes in. TfL Car and Auto Evolution report that Ford is blaming a specific assembly plant operator error at the Hermosillo plant. The breakdown is 2,296 Bronco Sports and 2,357 Mavericks. Ford is using what's called a 3-month in-service rule, arguing that if the ball joint was improperly seated, it would fail within the first 3 months of driving. So they say everything past that window is fine.
That sounds like a convenient cutoff. Are engineers buying that argument?
Not entirely. Independent engineering critiques highlighted by Car Complaints and Wheelfront argue that an improperly seated stud might hold under light use but fail catastrophically years later, especially when hitting a pothole or during off-road articulation. Critics are calling Ford's reasoning a statistical firewall designed to limit liability. And here's the kicker, Grace. According to NHTSA documentation, Ford is currently under a $165 million federal consent order for previous recall untimeliness, which means an independent third-party auditor is overseeing these decisions right now.
So owners with one of these affected trucks, what are they supposed to do today?
As of today, June 4th, 2026, there's no permanent repair available yet. Ford's dealer bulletin says technical instructions and parts for vehicles that fail inspection are expected later this summer, potentially late July. In the meantime, owners are told to leave their vehicles parked. Ford is offering complimentary towing to dealerships, or what they call mobile service, where a technician comes to your home for a 20 to 30-minute visual inspection.
And if their truck fails that inspection, are they just stranded?
No, and this is important. Fox Business reports that Ford has authorized dealerships to provide complimentary rental vehicles for owners whose trucks or SUVs fail the initial inspection, so you won't be left without transportation. To set up service, owners can call Ford customer service at 1-833-807-3673 or use the Ford Pass app. The number again is 1-833-807-3673.
All right, let's pivot to the much bigger recall by volume. 420,000 seatbelts is a staggering number.
It really is. The official figure is 419,967 SUVs, and this one's reported by Autoblog and CBS News. it breaks down to 342,283 Ford Expeditions and 77,684 Lincoln Navigators, all from the 2018 through 2022 model years. The defect could lead to injury or seatbelt failure during a crash, which is obviously a worst-case outcome for a safety device.
What exactly is going wrong with these seatbelts?
It's a chemistry problem inside the seatbelt retractor pretensioners in the front row. Autoblog explains that the propellant used in these pretensioners degrades when exposed to high heat environments over time. That chemical instability can cause what Ford calls inadvertent deployment, where the seatbelt suddenly and rapidly retracts against the occupant's body without any collision at all. Or it can do the opposite and lock entirely, meaning it won't restrain you in an actual crash.
That's frightening either way. And I understand this isn't Ford's first attempt to fix it?
Correct. This is actually Ford's third try. The previous recalls were in 2024, labeled 24S06, and 2025, labeled 25S31. Neither worked. Technical documentation from NHTSA shows why this attempt should be more effective. The earlier recalls relied on inspecting date codes, but this new one, 26S34, mandates the replacement of both front seatbelt retractors regardless of their current condition.
So they're not even bothering to inspect this time. What changed about the actual parts?
The legacy propellant was manufactured by a Tier 2 supplier called Nippon Kayaku Company Limited. In February 2022, that supplier switched to a more stable chemical combination, and Ford's new fix involves installing those updated components. The recall scope has also expanded to cover all model years from 2018 through 2022, which is a much larger population than the prior versions. Ford acknowledges at least one injury connected to this defect.
When can owners actually get their seatbelts replaced?
This is the tough part, Grace. Owners can expect an interim notification by the end of this week, somewhere between June 5th and 9th. But the final remedy notification and parts availability aren't planned until late August or early September. So drivers may have to operate their vehicles with potentially faulty belts for roughly the next 3 months.
3 months is a long time to wait on something that critical. Any guidance for those drivers in the meantime?
Ford hasn't issued a do not drive on these, so they're still considered drivable. But owners should pay attention to any unusual behavior from the belts and make sure they're using them properly. The bigger picture, Grace, is that ABC News and NPR are framing these dual recalls as a major undertaking for Ford, especially given the heightened federal oversight they're already under from that consent order.
For anyone listening who owns one of these vehicles, how do they check if theirs is included?
It's pretty straightforward. Locate your 17-digit vehicle identification number, which is your VIN, and enter it at nhtsa.gov/recalls or at ford.com/support/recalls. You can also call Ford customer service directly at 1-866-436-7332. That's the general line. For the Do Not Drive Bronco Sport and Maverick recall specifically, use the number I mentioned earlier, 1-833-807-3673.
And remind us which models are affected across both recalls.
We're talking 4 models total. For the seatbelt recall, it's the Ford Expedition and Lincoln Navigator from 2018 through 2022. For the Do Not Drive suspension recall, it's the Bronco Sport from 2021 through 2026, and the Maverick from 2022 through 2026. If you own any of those, please check your VIN today. Don't wait for a mailer to arrive.
Really practical advice. One last question, Chloe. Is there a broader takeaway here about Ford's quality control?
I think there is, Grace. Between the Hermosillo plant assembly error, the supplier issues with Nippon Kayaku, and 3 attempts to fix the same seatbelt problem, you're seeing a pattern that regulators clearly noticed when they hit Ford with that $165 million consent order. The independent auditor overseeing recall decisions is a significant development. Whether Ford's 3-month in-service rule holds up under that scrutiny is something we'll be watching closely in the coming months.
Excellent reporting as always, Chloe. Thank you so much for walking us through all of this.
Happy to help, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. On this June 4th, 2026, President Donald Trump has officially decided to make Todd Blanche the permanent leading man at the Department of Justice. Blanche has been acting the part for several weeks following the firing of former Attorney General Pam Bondi, but he now faces a summer of heated Senate confirmation battles. This nomination comes as the administration turns up the heat on Cuba, unsealing a major indictment at Miami's Freedom Tower against 94-year-old Raul Castro. FBI Director Kash Patel noted that Castro is charged with conspiracy to kill United States nationals and murder for the 1996 shoot-down of 2 civilian aircraft. While the White House describes this as a quest for justice, analysts at Lawfare and the Denver Clarion worry this could be a legal bridge to an indict and invade strategy. Blanche is already cleaning house, announcing the Justice Department will officially pull the plug on the $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. The program, which critics like Hakeem Jeffries called a political slush fund, hit a wall after a federal court injunction and pressure from Senate Republicans, who used a $70 billion border enforcement bill as leverage to freeze the finances. While the fund is being sent to pasture, the rest of the IRS settlement remains set in stone, specifically the provision shielding the president and his family from future tax audits. Legal experts had previously questioned if the fund could pass the bar of the Appropriations Clause, and it seems the Department of Justice has finally decided to drop the suit. In global news, the 29th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is off to a flying start, even as Ukrainian drones tried to crash the party at local oil terminals. Despite the fireworks, 20,000 delegates from 130 countries are gathered to discuss pragmatic dialogue. President Putin is expected to take the stage with leaders from Uzbekistan and Tanzania, alongside Chinese Vice President Han Zheng and guest of honor from Saudi Arabia. While the Kremlin claims a star-spangled presence led by Rodney Mims Cook Jr., the American Chamber of Commerce says those delegates are just flying solo. The forum is expected to seal over 1,000 agreements worth nearly 6,500 billion rubles, including a new artificial intelligence partnership between Interfax and Yandex. Looking to the stars, NASA is officially saying goodbye to the Maven orbiter, which has been silent since its signal went into orbitary in December 2025. Administrator Jared Isaacman is reshuffling the deck at the agency to speed up deep space travel, announcing that the Artemis 3 crew will be revealed on June 9th. However, the mission is doing a U-turn on its lunar plans, pivoting to an Earth orbit docking test, while the actual moon landing is being pushed to Artemis 4 in 2028. Meanwhile, the James Webb Space Telescope has sniffed out methane on the interstellar comet 3IATLAS, proving our cosmic neighbors have some strange chemistry. Finally, Gallup reports that American support for same-sex marriage has hit a bit of a plateau, sliding to 65% from a peak of 71%. This 15-point drop among Republicans suggests the national mood is shifting gears. On the home front, the economy is still a tough pill to swallow. Only 16% of adults feel financially fulfilled, while 83% are stressed about their bottom line. With the Economic Confidence Index sitting at a chilling -45, many voters feel like they are just treading water. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.